Hey kids! Thanks for tuning in to our next video podcast. I know you've been dying waiting for it, so I'm sorry it's been so long. We're talking about American suffering during the Depression, during the 1930s. So here's some statistics. By 1933, America's average unemployment rate was 25%, meaning a quarter of people that were of working age and that were trying to get a job were not able to get a job. That they take that into account. The government takes that into account for the statistics. So you have to be of working age. So they do not include infants and children, and they don't include elderly people. They only include people that are of working age and wanting to work. Wow, a quarter. All right, that sounds really awful, right? Well, let's get some other examples of certain cities that had it even worse. For example, Cleveland reported about 50% unemployment rate. Cleveland had a lot in common with Pittsburgh, like a lot of industry and factories. They were hit pretty hard. 50% unemployment, half of people. So think of your classmates, think of our class, looking around. The kids sitting next to you, if your parents have a job, their parents don't. Pretty scary to think about. And then some other cities had it even worse than that. Toledo, also in Ohio, had 80% unemployment rate. Wow, so you're actually very much in the minority if you do have a job. That's pretty hard to think about in America. I was hoping you might be thinking, what are the statistics today on unemployment? And the most recent that I have is, I just checked actually January 19th, 2013. And this is showing us from all the month of January, January 2002, January 2003, all the way till January 2012. And you can see, notice that this does not start at 0. It starts at 4%, and it goes up to 10%. Okay, in recent history, 10% is very high. So things are going great. Well, pretty great for the 2000s. 9/11, we saw a little spike after all that stuff went down. But the unemployment rate went down, which is good, right? And then the 2008 recession right here, right? That was bad. So it had started to go up. This is when Obama took office, right in here. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 years that he was in office, and it has started to go down. So I think most people agree that we're not in a recession right now. Hopefully that continues. So it looks like right now we're about 8%. I think they said 7.8 right now as of 2013. But it depends on when you're listening to this. Maybe this video podcast is very old, and who knows. Psychological effects. Okay, well, think about the Depression. How it would make you feel as a child, sure, but as a parent, as someone who's supposed to supply for your family. So 1928 to 1932, from those 4 or 5 years, the suicide rate went up 30%. Other stories of the day of the stock market crash, people jumping off of, the men from the stock exchange jumping off of bridges. They just had enough. They couldn't believe what had happened. They went from being filthy rich to having nothing. And 3 times as many people admitted to state mental hospitals in the same time period. Wow. It's not a very fun statistic. People were at the breaking point, walking around all day, couldn't find a job. They thought, what's wrong with me? It's a weird statistic. The marriage rate went down during the Depression. I wonder if you can think of any reasons why the marriage rate, meaning the rate at which people got married, the number of new marriages dropped. I mean, I could think of some reasons. I'm just assuming that part of it is because weddings themselves are ridiculously expensive. Although that's more of a recent thing. That's more of a recent history thing where I think that I'm convinced there's conspiracies where the diamond manufacturers, make diamonds so expensive. I'm still not really sure why a rock has to be so expensive. But hey, girl, sorry to offend you. I'm just thinking like a guy. But anyways, weddings today are so expensive. Sure, say yes to the dress and all that stuff. Woo! But I think more importantly, guys probably were not saying to their girlfriends, hey, let's get married, because the guy couldn't afford to provide for a wife and let alone children, so they probably just waited, it would be unfortunate to be alive and be young at that point in history. So to get food, to just survive, to get your maybe one meal a day, you might have to wait in line at the local bread line or soup kitchen. And they're private charities set up by the uh, just private organizations with private funding, usually. And this was definitely President Hoover's thing. He wanted this to happen. This was the way it had been done. The federal government didn't used to get involved with these kinds of things. But it kind of overwhelmed. The system was overwhelmed during the 1930s. So families who couldn't afford to pay their mortgage or their rent, they're kicked out on the street, right? They're evicted. And what happened with their landlord would ask the court for an eviction notice. The court officers would then show up at their house if they needed to and eject them physically or just put a note on the door. I mean, 9 times out of 10, they just had to be able to put a note on the door and most people are going to leave. But if not, they would send someone to physically remove you, and they'd pile your stuff on the street, just like this guy in the cartoon picture here. And that'd be, people would obviously try to fight that. And you have a reading you're going to do on people standing up for that, for each other. So they might have to live in these shanty towns known as Hoovervilles, and I know I've probably said this before, but the Hoovervilles, it was not, they don't use his name in a nice way. They're using it in a mocking way. People blamed him for all these problems. They said, well, maybe the stock market crash wasn't his fault, but they said, well, he should have done more during the Depression to help people, because it's such a large-scale problem. So people put up shacks on these unused public lands. I like to think of, pick a local soccer field or something, like a public land that, hey, people just set up tents because there's nowhere else to go. And by the way, I'm sure you're wondering at some point, no, he's not related to Hoover Vacuums, at least as far as I know. I mean, it's certainly not his company. I'm not saying there's not a distant relative, but not the same guy. Sorry. So here you go. I'm not really sure what city this is from, but a Hooverville during the Depression. Looks lovely this time of year. Interesting. This doesn't look so bad. This guy's a multi-room shack. And people put together with, what, extra tin scraps and 2x4s and who knows what. And this guy's, I guess, having a nice snack in the morning, or maybe he's smoking a cigarette. I'm not really sure. Does not look like a fun day to me. Or hey, you could be like my friend Hank the Hobo here. An alternative to living in a Hooverville, you could just become a hobo. You could ride the rails. That's what Hank loves to do. A lot of homeless people and unemployed Americans, usually young men without wives, without children. I'm not saying some of them didn't leave their wives and children, but they wandered around the country, walking, hitchhiking, or, like Hank's preferred way here, riding the rails. I like the caption on here. Hopping on a moving freight train was a dangerous act, but in the 30s, hundreds of thousands of men and women did it. This looks fun. I'm sure it was exciting, right? Young men, they figured, hey, I have nothing here, no jobs to offer me here. Might as well see what's around the country. So I'm sure you met a lot of people that way. Here's the guys catching a ride. Now, this is not legal. You're not allowed to do this. I'll talk about that in a second. They're breaking the law. Oh, this is Hank here's preferred way. But you gotta watch out for them railroad police. They'll get you. Yeah, they actually, the railroad companies, this became such an issue that they had their own police force that would patrol the tops of the trains. I mean, they knew that people were there. Just to discourage them, I'm sure they'd fine them or take them into custody, and then at the next stop, the next town, they would let them off and or take them to the police that way. But what are you going to do? Fine them? They don't have any money. They're broke. That's why they're doing it. So your second option is to throw them in jail. Well, hey, just let them spend a night in jail. Sounds good to me. A warm bed. They have to give you some food. It's America. You can't like cruel and unusually punish people, by starving them. So is that really a punishment? So you can imagine this didn't work very well, this whole process. And the hobos, meaning people that traveled around the country without a home, don't ask me how this starts, this kind of thing even happens, but they developed their own languages. written language, just notes. I mean, it wasn't a spoken language or anything, but it was. So on the tree, as you're passing through town, you get off the train and you see a tree and you see this symbol, or hey, help each other out. The crossword, go this way, turn left here, this way to the railroad. Oh, this is a good town. This one allows alcohol. Or uh-oh, no alcohol here, so be careful. Don't get in trouble. It's a dry town. Or yikes, be ready to defend yourself. Worth robbing. Wow. And arrested on sight. And this is nice. A doctor. No charge. No charge to the hobos. Isn't that lovely? So all kinds of messages they would leave each other. I'm not sure what some of the symbols mean. I don't see the connection for some of these symbols. I'm not sure how two diamonds equal be quiet, but somehow they communicated this. Couldn't tell you much more about it. There you go. Feel free to look it up for an extra credit point, though. So that's all we have for this edition of our video podcast. Make sure that you right now take the easy 5-question quiz on Blackboard so that you can prove that you did it. Watch this podcast, took the notes, and I hope you enjoyed it. Ha 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 ha. See you next time.